Is it worth irrigating a small scale cover crop for your pastured pigs? Let's try to answer that question in this video as I prepare to irrigate this field that I moved the pigs off of yesterday over to the field over there right along the edge of that green line, that fence line. You may not know this, but 3.5-inch fire hose is heavy, especially when there's water in it. So why am I doing it? Before I get started, let me show you what I've done with the irrigation so far. Out here where we raise our pastured pigs, I've just about got all my cross fencing set up for these paddocks. Each paddock is roughly 80 feet wide, and I've set it up like that so that I can run irrigation down one fence line, and this sprinkler will irrigate roughly a 95-foot radius with the pump that I have. Each of these fire hoses are 50 feet long, so when I run the irrigation down this line, it waters both this side and that side. We haven't had any rain since I moved the pigs off this paddock almost 3 weeks ago, but you can tell that the cover crops are starting to regrow. The buckwheat is growing well, the chicory is regrowing, and the sorghum sudan grass is regrowing as well. And on this side of the fence, while crossing the fence, I just shocked myself on the inside of the leg. And then on this side of the fence, you can see a cover crop growing really well, and it's actually thriving. Now this one I planted about 5 or 6 weeks ago when we were getting a lot of rain, and I no-till drilled it into the standing forage. You can still see a lot of grass in here. You can also see some of these weeds. I didn't disc it, I didn't spray it, I just no-tilled it directly into the field, and we got a pretty good stand. But we haven't had any rain since this stuff germinated and I planted it. So I watered both sides. The field on the left actually germinated while I was watering it. This one had already started germinating, but the plants were small, young, and they needed water to be able to grow effectively. As you walk through this field, you'll see some areas that have a lot of cover crops. Other areas, like right there, have a lot more weeds. But there's still good forage out here for the pigs to consume. Now, when I set up this water, I had to move all 1,800 feet of fire hose that I had. I started on the end and then ran the sprinkler for 2 or 3 hours and came on down. And then I started over again and ran the sprinkler again about a week and a half later. It was laborious because the gas tank on the pump is only 1 gallon. But I fixed that problem and I'll show you how in a minute. So now I can run the pump up to 3.5 hours at full throttle, full pressure, and put over 1.5 inches of water in one pass. And when I move the sprinkler down one section of hose, it's 50 feet, it waters the entire section of both fields really well. On the other side of that deer stand, in the corner of the woods, just above my head, there's a pond over there. I was planning on moving my 2-inch lay flat hose around that pond and irrigating this way. Unfortunately, I don't have enough lay flat hose. And the fire hose that I have does not adapt very well to that lay flat hose. You can buy lay flat hose with cam lock fittings on it for about $1 a foot if you buy them in 100-foot sections. I bought 1,800 feet of this 3.5-inch fire hose for $750 delivered. I thought it would be easier to adapt this fire hose to national pipe thread, but I was wrong. You see, this is New York Fire Department thread fire hose. It doesn't follow the standard that most fire hoses do today. That's why I bought it so cheap. So I had to pay $400 for fittings, in addition to the $750, so I'm almost $1,200 just getting the 1,800 feet of fire hose. Then the sprinkler that I'm using was $500 and the pump was $400. So all total, I'm in about $2,000, give or take a little bit, to get this pump running. I've got all this fire hose laid out, but instead of rolling it up, I'm going to drag it over there, and I've got a way to do it to make it easier. If you're wondering why I don't use a lighter hose, the reason is because of the friction loss on the hose. Simply put, this 3.5-inch fire hose uses less than 1/4 pound of pressure per 100 feet. So if I run at 2,000 feet, I'm losing less than 5 to 10 PSI, depending on how many turns and curves and that kind of stuff. If I were to use a 2-inch pipe or hose, then I would lose over 1 pound of pressure, drastically reducing the effectiveness of the pump, which means more gas, more time, more energy, and less watering surface area. It sounds crazy. Most importantly, this fire hose is much, much heavier duty than that 2.5-inch hose. To figure out if it's worth irrigating, we've really got to calculate all the costs, including time and labor. Starting all over, each pump and sprinkler that I have cost about $2,000 each to set up, and I've got 2 of them. That includes a total of almost 3,000 foot of irrigation hose, so those numbers are not the most accurate. If I had enough hose and was irrigating shorter distances, I could do it more easily. All that hose allows me to run 2 pumps at once from a long distance. But if I were irrigating closer to ponds and that kind of thing, it'd be a little bit cheaper in terms of the overhead cost. When I'm growing the cover crops, I can save roughly $100 per acre on feed costs, and that number is coming down. What that means is to irrigate a full acre of cover crop fields with enough rain to get it going really well. To get the equivalent of roughly 2 inches of rain per acre on a field, it cost me about $20 in fuel, plus about 2 hours in labor. The biggest challenge to irrigating with this system is this pump only has about an hour to hour and a half run time, which delivers effectively 3/8 to half an inch of water. It varies a little bit. A lot of that water ends up evaporating. So what I did is I took this 1 gallon pump off and put this 2.5 gallon pump on. Now I can go on and irrigate for the full 3 to 3.5 hours, put an inch worth of rain on the ground, and then move the pump again, making it much more effective in terms of irrigating while I'm gone. One of the things that's been the most effective for me is finding little projects like this that don't take a whole lot of time. They take a little problem solving and investing a little bit of time in them, and they can save a whole lot of time in the long run, and we're saving our water from evaporation and absorbing more of it into the ground. Now it's time to go stretch this hose out. Moving hose around is probably one of the most frustrating, but these long, straight stretches are much easier to do. Once the hose is laid out, it's just a matter of irrigating and moving the sprinkler, and so it's not that big of a deal. The frustrating thing about this move is that I'm only moving the hose about 100 feet to the east, but I have 600 feet, which is 12 sections of this 3.5-inch fire hose. It weighs several hundred pounds. The good thing about the fire hose is it's much heavier and tougher duty compared to the lay flat hose. And so that fire hose, I can connect them and pull 200-300 foot sections with the tractor. I try to pull into almost straight lines. I had to move the hose west, so I moved the hose south about 100 feet further than it needed to go, and then I hooked it back to the tractor and moved it at an angle up toward the new paddock where I was wanting to water, and it works pretty effectively that way. Your pouring skills ain't the best.
It ain't moonshine.
No, it's water is more important. So I've gotten back to the farm. It's time to move the sprinkler. Just thought I'd show you a little bit of what it looks like to do this. It's not rocket science, but I think seeing it will give you a little bit more perspective on how much of a hassle it is. When there's a lot of tension on these fire hoses, it is incredibly difficult to take them off. I pointed the camera at the wrong joint, pointed it here, and I should have pointed it down there where I was working. But you can see where the pump, where this watered, all the way against the trees, and then it came back over here. And so now it's going to overlap. Is it worth trying to irrigate 4 or 5 acres of cover crops? This is the 2nd year I've been doing it, and I'm just now getting a better system worked out. Like adding that extra gas tank made all the difference in the world, but I still don't know if it's worth it.